My name is ASalomon, and today, I will be ruining your childhood. Considering that you click on this video, you probably remember YuGiOh from your childhood. Or at least have heard someone talk about it before. With that extremely loose rapport established with you, I want to share with you my opinion on the one monster card and its archetype that is synonymous with YuGiOh, that being none other than a Dark Magician. And just like any other video essay trying to sound more sophisticated than it actually is, I will first need to recap blatantly obvious and highly irrelevant information to give myself some sense of authority.
Insert 1-minute segment about Dark Magician being in the first set of YuGiOh.
Insert another 20-minute segment about Dark Magician and its relevance in the anime.
Now that everyone is caught up with the history of Dark Magician, I will now talk about Dark Magician decks and their viability in 2023. To put it simply, Dark Magician decks are a joke. Quite literally actually, having a full 3-part setup with a setting of being a fan favorite archetype, a misdirection in the form of continuous support over the years, and a punchline that the archetype has yet to achieve meta status over the 25-year history of YuGiOh.
That's a joke, lads.
Honestly speaking, the deck is able to be played even in the competitive setting. You can even win games here and there. It has showed up in regional lists over the past few years, and I'm not just talking about Dark Magician being used in your normal monster deck that turbos out Satan himself. Instead, if you were to look at any YuGiOh aggregator site listing top meta decks of 2023-2024, you will find decks such as Pirelli, Castera, The Elements, Labyrinth, and for the OCG side, the deck that was absolutely destroyed in the TCG. So, the specific question I want to ask is, are Dark Magician decks actually any good? To actually make this video more meaningful than your average playground discussion, I want to lay down a few pointers first. Firstly, pure Dark Magician decks are the focus in this video. While you may entertain the idea of splicing the deck with another archetype, this introduces other variables into the deck assessment and will affect the conclusion made. While you can combine other archetypes in the actual deck building, we need to understand what are the flaws and strengths of the Dark Magician archetype itself before we introduce other ways to support it. Secondly, I will not be covering every single Dark Magician card.
Oh brother, this guy stinks!
While I have considered nearly every single related card when analysing for this video, I am unfortunately not going to talk about nearly 80 cards, because that would be a horrible task for me to script and edit, and that would bore the hell out of you. Because according to YouTube analytics, my average viewer has an average attention span of about 5 minutes, and I would need to start inserting copyrighted Family Guy clips. So don't expect me to talk about cards like Dark Magician Knight because of how strong that single target destruction is. Thirdly, tech cards, staples, hand traps, and floodgates will not be evaluated with the Dark Magician archetype. While they comprise a significant portion of modern decks,
Look how they massacred my boy.
the expectation that a deck needs to be propped up by these cards to be functional is simply delusional. An archetype should have been designed to work by itself, and failing which indicates that there is a fundamental issue with the archetype that needs fixing. 1 or 2 tech cards can be considered within the archetype to improve the functionality of the deck, but keeping in mind not to make the deck overly reliant on it and serve as a crutch. I have provided a separate section in this video that talks about some tech cards that I feel will go together with the Dark Magician archetype, but the cards I have chosen are primarily cards that are only enabled in a select few decks, including pure Dark Magician decks. I do not want to see in the comments about how you can play a singular copy of Little D to be fused with Dark Magician into Gigantozauler, because that is absolute lunacy. Instead, please schedule a new session with your therapist as soon as possible to discuss your incessant desire for making really bad decisions in life. The last pointer is that I'm using Master Duo as my chosen platform to playtest my Dark Magician deck and get a better understanding of the archetype. Master Duo will be a better platform to run tests due to a few factors. The rank system incentivizes players to play better decks as opposed to playing on the Wild West of EDO Pro. The automated playing field removes the ambiguity of illegal plays and judge calls from Dueling Book.
Just do that because he has no out and wants to troll. Press the start button, start turn button. I just got this screenshot from his POV. He sent me this. This dude is hard lying to me. This is Inspect Element and MS Paint mixed together.
And lastly, I use Master Duel for relative affordability of a pure Dark Magician deck because I'm too broke to buy the actual deck in real life and test it. There are also limitations to using Master Duel as well, which includes having a custom ban list for Master Duel and a different card pool from the TCG and OCG, alongside a best of one format which does not allow the deck to showcase its flexibility post-siding. As a result, here's my deck that I will be using throughout this video. I have decided to include several cards into my deck to test its effectiveness. I have also decided to use the Bestial monsters to counter Tearments and Backrow Remover for Labyrinth. The card ratios are not at 3 copies due to deck constraints as well. To help you through this video, here are the timestamps of each segment that I'll be going through today. Now, with all of this out of the way, let's start talking about Black Magician! As everyone knows, Dark Magician is the strongest monster card ever created. Its effect lets it summon itself if there are no monsters on the field. After all, it is the ultimate wizard in terms of attack and defense. Kidding aside, this card is just a level 7 Dark Spellcaster normal monster with 2500 attack and 2100 defense. Being the case, this card is literally useless unless it is on the board. Being vanilla is only going to get you so far. And since this card is the centerpiece of the deck, this is problem number 0 of the deck, but there is nothing much we can do about it. Just like how you were born into unfortunate circumstances, like being born with a slightly under average appearance, which just snowballs into depressive episodes in life because childhood bullying is a trauma that never goes away. So, to solve this issue, Konami has introduced multiple support cards in order to bring out easier from the hand, from the graveyard, and even from the deck. These cards can be in the form of monsters, spells, or even traps. With such a wide array of cards to choose from, Dark Magician decks need to choose a balance of these cards just like any other deck. Unless you are a runic player. You can literally lobotomize yourself and still be able to top regionals by throwing a random assortment of your spells into your deck. And no, I am not going to stop shitting on runic players because they decided to play one of the laziest decks ever created, both in deck building and in actual game sense. Fuck you, runic players. Anyways, back on topic. Dark Magician support cards require some form of consistency in this day and age. So, there are 2 main searches in the deck, which are Magician's Rod and Illusion of Chaos. These 2 cards are relatively new cards in YuGiOh, with Magician's Rod being introduced in 2016 and Illusion of Chaos being introduced in 2021. Magician's Rod lets you search for a support spell or trap when it is normal summoned, whereas Illusion of Chaos lets you reveal itself in your hand to search for Dark Magician itself or a supporting non-ritual monster, although you have to return 1 card back to the top of your deck because Konami just hates ritual monsters so damn much, even in their precious Dark Magician archetype. Either way, we have our resource chain relatively established by this point. Illusion of Chaos searches any monster you need, including Magician's Rod, which in turn is your main normal summon for the deck, that lets you search for any spell or trap that you may need. The only restriction on what these 2 cards can search for is that the search target must mention Dark Magician by name. That restriction shouldn't be a problem anyways, since we are talking about an archetype after all. Cards that they can't search should just be some tech cards or some really niche cards that we don't need to consider, right? Let's start with a relatively strong card in the deck. Dark Paladin is a fusion monster that requires 1 Dark Magician and 1 Buster Blader as its materials. The best part about this card is that it can repeatedly negate spells just by discarding 1 card each time, and you can easily stop your opponent from playing the game if you have enough discard fodder. However, this card is practically not summonable in Dark Magician decks because Buster Blader itself is not searchable in the deck. You have to pray and wait to draw into that card, or play other cards such as Fusion Deployment that just takes up space in your optimally constructed 40 card deck. You should not be including loosely related cards just to shoehorn 1 brick into the deck. But there will be people that will say that Dark Magician decks can play Fusion Deployment anyways because you can summon Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl.
But the people are retarded.
Please, refer back to problem 0. You don't get any advantage from summoning these 2 anyways. The archetype itself has other ways to summon these 2 and is far more consistent. But to be fair, the upsides of Fusion Deployment in this case is there is a spell, which means that you don't have to wait for the next turn to summon these 2 cards. and fusion deployment is less restrictive than Dark Magic Curtain. If you really wanted Dark Magician on your field, you could just use Magician Souls. But if you're going to perform fusion summons anyway, you can just easily use a Dark Magician from your hand as it is on your field. Oh, but ASalomon, how about the Eye of Timaeus? That card needs you to target Dark Magician on the field, and that card lets you summon any fusion monster that uses it as a fusion material. You can just cheat out Dark Paladin this way and skip using Buster Blader in your deck. If you're going to ask me about this card, you already damn well know what is wrong with this card. Remember what this section is called? This card is not searchable. It is literally not consistent in the sighters, and you run into the issue of balancing the number of copies you play in your deck. 1 copy is too limiting and unlikely to be drawn, and 3 copies guarantee that you will open at least 1 copy only a third of the time. But knowing good old statistics, you're going to get that 3.64% chance of drawing 2 or even 3 copies and breaking your entire hand. And playing 2 copies places you in this weird zone that lets you get it 22% of the time in your opening hand, which is 1 in every 5 games if you can't do math. You can literally play a full match of 3 games and still not see this card. This whole debacle is why being a searchable card is so important for any deck. You play more searches to limit how many copies of one-off cards you play, but still having a wide variety of these one-off cards. Dark Magician decks are definitely still going to play at least 1 copy of this card because of how powerful it is, but you are definitely going to have to pray to some deity to not break and still be able to use this card consistently. Here is another scenario. Let's say you are playing the Eye of Timaeus in your deck. Since it is not searchable, you can just draw into it, right? It is not like Dark Magician has a lack of draw power. It is not a super powerful draw engine like Sky Strikers is in the OCG, but it definitely can draw a few cards in a turn. Here is a clip summing up doing just that in Dark Magicians.
You know how much I sacrificed?
Dark Magician draw power is far too balanced in my opinion. You need to sacrifice either time or resources just to get to that draw. To start, Magician Souls is a card that will definitely be played in the deck, but to use its draw effect, you first need to put it on the field, which means you miss out on placing Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl on your field by its effect. It can affect some of your plays, but if you could perform fusion summons, you probably wouldn't need the draw power anyways. The second issue, however, is that you need to send spells or traps to the graveyard as cost. You essentially go negative first before going card neutral. So, you can be interrupted easily at this point, and you have to simply proceed to the cry phase and end your turn.
Nope.
The next card is Soul Servant, which draws based on the number of unique names on your field and in your graveyard. Currently, you can draw up to 4 cards, and it is commonly observed that you would draw 2 or even 3 cards in the grind game. But usually this card is used to draw only 1 card on turn 1, which is when getting to the Eye of Timaeus is the most important. The card is essentially a search and not a draw by this point, since you are stacking a card that mentions Dark Magician in its card text on top of your deck before using its draw effect to get that card. This reinforces the crushing reality that the cards that you want to draw are still not going to be drawn by this card, and those that can already be searched are just getting more and more consistent. To be fair, this is actually the only way to search out Magician of Chaos in the Ritual variant. Yay, I guess?
Life is pain!
The last card is the Dark Magicians. It is arguably easy to fusion summon since it just requires 1 Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl and 1 other spellcaster monster, which should be available to you all the time. The same cannot be said about the parental love of Chinese parents, and the only certainty from them is emotional abuse, generational trauma, and the sheer unwillingness to change because of tradition and extremely loose family ties to our Lord and Savior Mao Zedong, because clearly no other humans existed before 1921. This will pass on to the next generation like a treasured family heirloom, but instead of a prized artifact being passed down, you instead pass down depression and psychopathy, and you start wondering where did everything go so wrong when your children start contemplating a 100 meters free fall without a bungee cord. Very similar to the analogy, which definitely does not exist in real life, the Dark Magician's effect requires a bit of waiting to bear fruit, and you don't get any benefits if your child is no longer there with you in the future. This fusion monster lets you draw a card in the next chain after a spell or trap was activated, which means that if it leaves the field within that same chain, you don't get to draw a card. The only recourse is if this card was destroyed, where you can special summon both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl from the hand, deck, or graveyard just so you can repeat this perpetual cycle of parental neglect and abuse. The most ironic thing is that this card is actually the only way to draw cards without going negative by paying a cost first like Magician's Soul, and it's not a knockoff searching effect like Soul Servant. So, at the end of the day, you aren't going to get your Eye of Timaeus any more easily with these 3 cards with draw effects.
Well, that was idiotic.
You damn well know what this card is, even if you don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or have never watched the anime. But everyone knows that this card must go with Dark Magician.
Or is it?
I'm not referring to the Magician Girl deck spin-off here, because this is a video about Dark Magician. But normally, if you want to play Dark Magician Girl, you have to play her in a Dark Magician deck. But, if you want to play a Dark Magician deck, do you have to play Dark Magician Girl?
Stop asking so many fucking questions.
This card is required for many cards in the archetype to function to their full effect. The list includes Bond between Teacher and Student, Dark Burning Attack, Dark Burning Magic, Dark Magic Twin Burst, Dark Magician Girl the Dragon Knight, Magician's Combination, Magician's Salvation, Sage's Stone, and the Dark Magicians. While some cards are outdated or extremely niche, the other cards are some of the strongest cards in the archetype. Bond between Teacher and Student lets you search for Dark Burning Magic, which is a bot nuke if you control both Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl, which is how several games are won. Magician's Salvation and the Dark Magicians both bring recurring field presence for the deck, and helps make some cards live because they require either Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl on the field to be activated. And lastly, Magician's Combination is a strong Omni Negate that requires you to alternate between both monsters and has a floating effect to destroy a card. This all means that you must play Dark Magician Girl in your deck to have access to these cards, and need to weigh the risk of playing one additional break in your deck. Of course, you can consider not using these cards at all, and just play whatever is left, which just needs Dark Magician itself. But I want to bring particular attention to Magician's Combination. As I mentioned earlier, this card is an Omni Negate. Ask yourself this question: how many negation effects are there in the Dark Magician archetype? And of them, how many are meant to stop your opponent's plays and not to protect your cards? Out of 7 cards that mention negate, only Dark Cavalry protects your cards through negation. Defensive negation like this is not as useful as offensive negations that aim to stop your opponent's plays. This is the core reason why a card like Calamity Caesar is not played at all in Vanquished Soul.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of Master.
What?
Destined Rivals, Illusion of Chaos, and Magician Navigation are one-time use negations and do not offer any continued field presence for the deck. It is normal to use one-time use negations such as the Solemn Counter Traps or Libromancer Intervention, but these negates are often high-impact negations or recyclable within the deck. This is because you need to win the game within the next turn or continue to out-resource your opponent. Otherwise, your opponent has time to recover from the fact that you just played a trap card in 2023 and did not summon a big TD Golf Waifu as a result. This means that he can just perform his full combo as if nothing had happened in the previous turn. So, the problem with these 3 cards is that they negate only very specific group of cards and are relatively not recyclable within Dark Magician decks. It still amazes me that in a deck that vomits out disposable spells and traps all the time, has only one way to recycle its traps from the graveyard, and that is through Soul Servant, which is more likely used to get cards from your deck and not back from your graveyard. As a result, there is limited or no continued field presence for these cards. And if you want to argue that Illusion of Chaos can be resummoned to use its negation again and again, I would suggest that you pick up any ritual deck that does not use Drytrons and learn the pains of ritual summoning. To illustrate this point even further, consider this. In front of you on your opponent's board is a Baron de Fleur. It has used its negation already. Are you still concerned about it? The answer is that yes, you would, provided that you're aware of what else it could do. It could continue to be a 3000 attack beat stick that lowers your life points turn after turn. It could continue to destroy your cards one by one each turn, or your opponent could just tag it out for a monster in the graveyard to eventually resummon Baron the Fleur and have his negate to be live once again. This concept of field presence is ever more so important in a deck like Dark Magician that lives and dies by its spells and traps. It is after all not a combo deck that can effortlessly shut down a game or easily kill in one turn. Instead, it is a tempo based deck.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
So, unless Konami intends to fundamentally change how Dark Magicians is played, one-time use negations will still remain suboptimal in the deck. It is not to say that Dark Magician decks cannot use their one-time use negates, but there needs to be something to back it up or cover what it cannot negate. And that brings me to the last 3 negations for the deck. I have mentioned about Dark Paladin previously, and it is essentially locked behind the Eye of Timaeus, which has consistency issues. Red Eyes Dark Dragoon is without a doubt the best card in the whole archetype, which can be easily summoned by using Timaeus the United Dragon and one Dark Magician. Remember how I told you about Baron the Fleur earlier? Baron can be considered the nerf version of this card. This card has so many layers of protection, you would think that he's actually impotent and can't get any woman pregnant. So, if you're still in the same realm of existence as him, I'm sorry, but if you want to play Dark Magicians in the TCG, he will be your boss monster. He is your primary game plan, and he will be your knight in shining armor that will lead you to a gory and bloodied victory. And we finally come back to this card, Magician's Combination. If you're in the OCG like me, you are stuck with this card to be your one and only form of recurring negation. You don't get to use Red Eyes Dark Dragon, you don't get to recur your other negations because they are one-time use cards, and the worst part of all, you have to play Dark Magician Girl in your deck, which brings you back to problem number 3 of having to play an additional brick in your deck. This fixation on negation is not unwarranted either, because simple destruction is often not enough to stop modern decks that have graveyard effects or immunity to destruction, and the Dark Magician archetype's ability to banish cards are limited to only the few. How will you deal with an effect that activates in a hand? And how will you deal with an effect that activates in a graveyard?
How do you kill that which has no life?
So, do we just give Dark Magician more tools to use? In my opinion, Konami just needs to be careful what they provide as support. A problem that is unique to Dark Magician decks is the clogging of your spell and trap zones.
Can't make it. The shit's stuck. Out of my way, son! Door stuck! Door stuck! Please! I beg you!
An optimal board will usually include one Magician Salvation with one Eternal Soul, one Dark Magical Circle, one or two boss monsters on your field, and the remaining spell and trap zones filled with whatever remaining cards you can set for your opponent's turn. Suppose that you play Magician's Combination as well, and Konami creates a new continuous spell or trap that is worth playing. Now, you are left with only one spell trap zone that is meant for all your remaining spells and traps, which include your fusion spells, your board breaker cards, and your staples. This is not a huge problem in actuality, but it can feel suffocating at times if you are unable to have the flexibility of activating a quick play spell in chain because you have already clogged up your zones. Speaking of spells and traps, Magician's Rod is your best normal summon in archetype, as you can search for any spell or trap that mentions Dark Magician on its normal summon. In the event that it gets negated, or for some reason, just not have access to it despite playing what seems to be 9 copies of it in your deck, just how much more can be searched from the deck? Searching for in-archetype monsters would depend on whether you have already used Illusion of Chaos to search for Magician's Rod earlier. But searching for Dark Magician specifically is far easier with cards such as Apprentice Illusion Magician and Illusion Magic. Magician's Salvation only sets up Eternal Soul, which must wait until the next turn to search for one or two specific cards. Bond between teacher and student requires some setup, but even then, you are limited in what you can search. The good thing is that this means your board breaker spells are easier to access compared to your other spells and traps.
What is this game, dude? Are you serious? Give me a green card! What are you doing? Holy shit!
So, we are now left with Dark Magical Circle, Soul Servant, and Dark Magic Inheritance, which can let you add from your deck your other Dark Magician spells and traps. Sometimes you just aren't going to get what you want excavating the top 3 cards from Dark Magical Circle, and the other 2 rely on some form of setup in order to be activated. This is of course just nitpicking at the details of the deck by this point, through pessimistic conditions. But it helps to understand how much more disadvantaged you are when you cannot magically fix your hand using your dedicated spell trap searcher for the deck.
If you think you can graduate from this school without kissing my cock, you are dead wrong.
Another thing to note is that because you are relying on Magician's Rod as your normal summon for the deck, it is difficult to pair this card with another engine that also takes up your normal summon. Most notably, the Spellbook engine, which could offer you a draw 2 spell, a strong interruption, even more protection, and possibly a Jargon if played optimally. The last problem I identified for the deck is that the entire archetype feels far too balanced. I had mentioned earlier that the deck has card drawing power that is overly balanced. To add to this, most interaction with the opponent is on a 1-to-1 basis. Sure, there are some board wipes, but a large part of them are restricted to being used during your turn only. Only Dark Burning Magic is a quick play board wipe, and even that requires you to play 2 very specific monsters which can be considered bricks due to the lack of effects on them. You get punished severely when your Eternal Soul gets removed from the field, which is introduced to offset the protection offered to only Dark Magician specifically. You also need to perform an action in order to use Dark Magical Circle or Shrine in Unity to activate their effects to only banish 1 card. And each special summon effect only lets you bring up 1 monster at a time in a format where this exists. Why is nothing considered broken in this whole archetype? The only exception is Dragoon, but that required Konami to throw in 3 really strong effects onto 1 card to make something happen. This is still not enough to gloss over the fact that even Red Eyes Dark Dragoon is somewhat forced to be balanced by requiring you to discard 1 card for its negate. The deck behaves like a jack of all trades, master of none, being able to offer so many things, but just not able to offer enough of one. Nothing really stands out for this deck, besides its rich history and nostalgic relevance. But people move on. The game moves on. Everything has changed, all except for you. You're interesting, no doubt, but perhaps you just lack what other people want. Some sense of security for the future, some sense of relatability and familiarity, not through nostalgia and past actions, but with what is in the present. You can't just shoehorn yourself into every situation that you want and expect people to accept you as is. You need to adapt, to change, to meet the situation at hand, because that is what people want. You want their attention and acceptance, and they want to solve today's problems, not yesterday's. Or instead, you can just sit idly by as the world changes around you, only to suddenly see your friend that has been with you from the beginning suddenly become more accepted by others, while you aren't. And they start drifting away from you, eventually. And unfortunately, this is just a fact of life that many have to face. I'm sorry if this sounded just a little too real. But sometimes, you just needed someone to say it to you, even though you knew the answer all this while. There will be people out there to help you be the best version you can be. And all you need to do is to be accepting of them as you want them to be accepting of you. This is not financial advice. This is just a YouTube video about a children's card game without any intent of investment or value speculation. Please consult a financial advisor that represents themselves in a position of a fiduciary before entrusting anyone with your money. I am not responsible if you are exposed to financial losses due to MLMs, Ponzi schemes, cults, religions, and/or any scams. Aforementioned list is not exhaustive. So, what now? After listing down the numerous problems of Dark Magician, it begins to make sense why players are mixing other archetypes and engines with Dark Magicians in order for it to be playable in today's metagame. It also makes sense why hardly anyone even wants to play this deck to begin with. Are there any upsides to playing this deck then? Are there any strong suits or unique advantages to the deck? Or maybe it can cover a specific niche in the current metagame? There's not much I can think of, really. The deck is overly balanced as I have mentioned. Something special might be the focus on spells and traps as opposed to monster effects, as the deck will be exposed to different risks and counters. More so back row removal, instead of Kaijus, Nibiru, or Dark Ruler no more. While the deck still has monsters to protect, this is largely moot due to the greater importance of Dark Magician spells and traps, and your opponent is more likely to prioritize removing them first. This also means that you can run several generic floodgates more effectively, primarily skill drain because you can easily work around it by using Secrets of Dark Magic to allow your on-field monster effects to resolve without being negated, or if your opponent is using it, you can use your wide range of spells to remove it easily. Another upside of the deck is how consistent it is, because most cards that you want are easily searchable in archetype. you play 3 copies of Preparation of Rites to have 3 copies of Illusion of Chaos to facilitate 3 copies of Magician's Rod. Finding any spell or trap that you want should come easily, of course assuming that you do not get interrupted. You can easily come out with a relatively strong board of 1 Eternal Soul and 1 Dark Magician the Dragon Knight, and you can proceed to control the board with your other cards. The deck also does not need a high investment into its extra deck as well, despite the high number of unique fusion monsters available to the archetype. As disappointing as it is, you're fine just playing with your spells and traps, and performing fusion summons are just a cherry on top. In deck building, you can consider super polymerization as well, and filling in your extra deck with super poly targets.
You pick up your palette knife and then work that into meat. Give your meat a good old rub. That's it. Nice and hot. Hot and spicy meat. Yeah, boy.
Overall, you get some flexibility when building a Dark Magician deck because you can focus more into spells and traps, or focus more into a fusion-centric deck, all while playing a range of staples and archetype pairings because your core engine is consistent enough.
I want to die.
By this point, if you have not been discouraged to try the deck, here are some tech cards that I've identified for the deck. To start off, any draw power is more than welcome to the deck. Sacred Sword of 7 stars, Allure of Darkness, or a small spellbook package with Spellwork of Knowledge are commonly used to facilitate the draw power of Dark Magician decks. Something I would consider is using Upstart Goblins and Chicken Games, but those are much better used in the OCG format and Master Duel, where you can play more copies of them. If you're in the TCG, just play the 1 Upstart Goblin anyways. Oh wait. Anyways, these spells all help to build your graveyard if you want to increase the attack of several of your fusion boss monsters or enable Dark Magic Inheritance. Another set of cards you can consider are level 6 or lower Dark Spellcasters that have niche effects because you can summon them from the deck with Magician Navigation. Several notable cards are Gravekeeper Shaman, Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, and Knight's End Sorcerer. You can also consider level 6 or higher light or dark spellcasters because you can send them to the graveyard using Magician Souls and subsequently bring them back from the graveyard using Master of Chaos. This setup can be considered janky, but it is still noteworthy enough for me to mention here. Several notable cards are Dogmatica Maximus, Gravekeeper Shaman, Generator Boss of Storms, and Witchcrafter Madame Vare. There are also several spells and traps that support spellcasters in general, such as Black Illusion or Magical Dimension. But in my opinion, these cards are easily overshadowed by the other Dark Magician spells and traps which are already searchable in Archetype. Sacred Village of Spellcasters is also useful, but you have to figure out on your own how to balance the consistency of your deck if you choose to use it. Something of note is the ever notorious Eradicator Epidemic Virus, which can be activated easily in the deck because of the 2500 attack of Dark Magician. Play it in the side deck in tournaments because you sure aren't getting that one copy in Master Duel. Bestial monsters are currently being paired with the deck because of the current meta matchup, and they can be used as fusion materials for several Dark Magician fusion monsters. The branded core cards are played for a similar reason, with the added benefit of providing other fusion boss monsters to your extra deck. In terms of extra deck monsters, there are a few rank 6 and rank 7 spellcaster Xyz monsters that are commonly played in Dark Magician decks. One notable fusion monster that Dark Magician decks can play is Mysterion, the Dragon Crown, that just requires one spellcaster and one dragon monster, which is the same materials as several other Dark Magician fusion monsters. This card is strangely useful against decks that share their type and special summon themselves using monster effects, namely Bestials and Telements. On the next chain after a monster was special summoned by said monster effect, this fusion monster can banish monsters who share the same type as the summoned monster, assuming you can target that monster.
Come into my house! Suck my dick! They call me gay!
I don't think Dark Magician decks can be played as a combo deck, at least not with its current card pool. Instead, it would just be better to build a control or tempo deck like what everyone else builds. Players have considered playing Dark Magician in a fusion toolbox deck, such as mixing in Branded or Shadows. The alternative is mixing in a bunch of Floodgates, because Dark Magician is clearly in need of a crutch to stay active. Either way, Dark Magicians are going to be a slow deck to play, just like how slow I've been in making this video, because I spent a good portion of July grinding out Genshin because I needed Primo Gems to roll for Eula, and having 90 rolls was not enough because I had lost 50-50. Oh, and I also learned how to model and animate in Blender, and I also got a full-time job, and I also got hooked onto other games, and I have a horrendous video editing workflow, and I'm also super lazy.
You really are insane.
So, just like the maniacs trying to min-max the Rotting Corpse of Kurtzing, which I have lost 50-50 4 times to, there are also other people trying to min-max Dark Magicians. For the TCG players, here's a channel that I found while doing this video. For the OCG players, however, we just have to wait and see how many parts of the Davinci engine gets hit on the ban list because of how special it is. Side note by the way, it is my preconceived notion that both Davinci and Mikanko are designed by the same artist, and I'm all for seeing more of their artwork because they look so goddamn pretty and So, after all that is said and done, we come back to the question I started out with. Are Dark Magician decks actually any good? Actually, it's a good deck.
Boo this man!
It's just that every other deck is by far more superior than it due to Konami's incessant desire to power creep sharply in recent years. Every modern deck ends up being an unbreakable board or an impenetrable stronghold, both being achieved relatively easily with one-card combos or with minimal difficulty. Konami hasn't forgotten about the Dark Magician archetype, however. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing them release a new Dark Magician Girl merchandise every few months. Konami has indeed released support for the archetype in the past few years, with the most recent being in Battle of Chaos. On paper, a deck is going to be decently strong if you keep giving it support cards. The archetype has consistency, it has removal, and it has disruptions, all of which a current meta deck has. But it never seems to be enough since the deck still feels slow and clunky. All of the 7 problems that I've discussed throughout this video are the underlying issues of the archetype. There very well could be more problems that I've not mentioned. By all means, that the Dark Magician archetype is fundamentally flawed and needs a severe overhaul to be better suited against the current meta. Either that, or the archetype needs a very specific support wave that ties in every single Dark Magician card to be played in a far more linear but powerful manner. For example, look at Rescue Ace and Pirelli suddenly shooting to tier 1 meta status just because of 1 or 2 new cards. Rescue Ace and Pirelli are control decks with game plans that are relatively straightforward. Rescue Ace tries to end on 5 set spells and traps with Hydrant, while Pirelli builds up Noir with multiple quick play spells under it, and the new tools given all support the deck in getting there. Meanwhile, in its infinite wisdom, Konami brings out the most useless card for the Mikanko archetype, the other archetype that was released alongside Rescue Ace and Pirelli. What is this card even supposed to achieve in the deck? It is so damn confusing to anyone how it fits into the deck that most Mikanko deck lists just choose to leave it out entirely. If Konami wants to provide this much needed band-aid for Dark Magician, Konami first needs to know what is the end goal for the Dark Magician archetype. Is the deck supposed to focus more on its spells and traps? Spells and traps should become more impactful and easier to recycle within the deck. Is the deck supposed to focus on its fusion and ritual monsters? They should become easier to summon and have stronger effects. Is the deck supposed to include Dark Magician Girl? Cards that mention Dark Magician Girl should be independently searchable of Dark Magician cards. Or, better yet, there should be actual and useful effects on both of them. It has been 25 years, and Konami still has yet to settle on a clear path for their beloved Dark Magician archetype. So, why is that? I guess that is because Konami just really fucking hates the ritual summoning mechanic and everything associated with it.